You are capable of far more than you're currently getting out of yourself. And the thing holding you back isn't usually effort, and it's not talent. It's that your brain isn't performing anywhere near what it's actually capable of. And nobody's ever properly shown you how to change that. Well, that's the whole reason I'm here. And it's why I do these videos and coaching and everything else I do. Because you can change it. And one of the most powerful levers that you have is your training or your exercise. Not just doing more of it and hoping that it kind of helps somewhere. I mean matching the kind of training you do to the kind of thinking that you need to do. So get that right, and it's about as close to an unfair advantage as you'll ever find. So let me show you exactly how it all works. I'm Gavin Evers, a clinical strength conditioning and rehabilitation coach and a cognitive performance specialist. Now, for nearly 25 years, I've coached people who think for a living, and everything I do is about using your body to get more out of your brain. It's the thing that the Fit Mind is built on. And this video is all about helping you understand the method so that you can improve the biggest business asset that you own, which is your brain. So here's the idea that the whole thing rests on. So for years, you've been told that exercise is good for your brain, and it's true, but it's about as useful as being told to eat more vegetables and get more sleep. It's right, it just doesn't tell you what to actually do, on a Monday morning when you're looking at your diary and you've got a hectic week coming up. Here's how I think about all of this. So your brain doesn't do one single job. Deep analytical work, coming up with ideas, holding your nerve when the pressure is on. These are completely different jobs, and your brain runs each of them in a different physiological state. Now, here's the part that took me years to really appreciate. But different kinds of movement push your brain towards those different states, which means that you're not relying on fate or luck or whatever to decide how your brain is going to perform. You can set it up in advance. You can walk into the morning already primed for the exact work that you need to do that day. Now that's a shift. You stop asking, did I exercise? And you start asking, did I train for what today actually needs? And the day you start thinking like that is the day your training stops being a general health thing that you just try and fit in because you know it's good for you. And it starts to become a performance tool that you sharpen depending on what you need to do that particular day. Now, I'm going to be straight with you because there's lots of people in the health and fitness space that perhaps, let's say, embellish certain claims, and I don't want to be that guy. So I can't hand you an exact workout at an exact dose for an exact result, the way a doctor writes milligrams on a prescription, The science just isn't that precise yet, and anyone who pretends that it is, I just maybe approach it with a little bit of skepticism. But what I can do is point you clearly in the right direction and then make the call from 25 years of watching how this actually plays out, with real people, real jobs, real deadlines. And that judgment is the whole point. It's the one thing a downloadable PDF can never really do for you. So no, it isn't milligram perfect, and it doesn't need to be. The direction on its own will put you streets ahead of where you're standing right now. Right, let me make this real because this is where it gets really useful, right? There's 3 different types a day, and what I'd actually suggest that you do before each one. So let's start with the deep analytical morning. You've got a hard problem to crack, a model to build, or a contract that you need to read really thoroughly because you can't miss a thing. This is the kind of work where being counts for nothing if you're sloppy. You need to be really accurate, and you need to hold a lot in your head at once. Because here's what people often get wrong. They either roll in cold with their brain still kind of half asleep, or they go nuts in the gym and hammer themselves and thinking that it's going to wake them up. But both of those will cost you. What actually primes this kind of work, this kind of thinking, is a fairly short bout of moderate movement, enough to lift your heart rate and get your blood moving without draining you. So a brisk walk, some easy cardio, some steady strength work, you can do it at home, in the garden, in the gym, whatever you prefer. That doesn't matter. That's what sharpens, that type of training, that's what sharpens your executive function, which is the focus and the self-control you're about to lean on for the next couple of hours of work. The trap is thinking that more is better, and that smashing yourself into the ground is a good thing. But if you do that, you'll sit down to your most demanding work already depleted, and that's exactly when the errors start creeping in. So this is a day you deliberately leave a little bit in the tank. And if you're interested, I've done a full breakdown on training before deep analytical work, and I'll leave a link for you there. The second thing is creative work, and this is a genuinely different state in the brain, which is the part I love. It's really interesting. So when you're generating ideas, like working something out, trying to get unstuck on something, your brain isn't doing tight focus analysis. It's doing almost the opposite, right? It's kind of roaming a bit, trying to make loose connections, letting one thought bump into another, and just kind of letting your mind kind of think freely. That's kind of creative work, right? And there's a brilliant piece of research on this from Stanford University. So they had people do creative thinking tasks either sitting still or walking around. And what they found was that walking lifted their idea generating thinking by a serious margin, by around 80%. But I think this next part is actually really quite clever as well. It's quite useful. It didn't help, the walking didn't help the narrow one right answer kind of thinking at all. Only the free wandering creative kind. And what they also found was that it kept working for hours after they sat back down. So the walk sort of kind of primes your body, or your brain, sorry, and then you keep drawing on that for hours afterward. So next time you're stuck on something creative, the worst thing that you can do is just kind of sit there and grind harder and harder and hope that it all works out. So get up, go for a walk, a proper kind of amble. Don't just go for a crazy march. Ideally, nothing in your ears, and just let your mind loose. Let it wander. And a lot of you already know that your best ideas turn up on a walk and not when you're sitting at your desks. Well, now you know it's not a coincidence. It's physiology. And once you know it, you can start to use it on purpose. I go into a deeper dive in another episode. I'll link that too. The third kind is the big meeting or the presentation, and this is a different problem completely again. So this one isn't just about sharpening your focus, and it isn't about kind of loosening up your ideas. It's about your nerves. Now, when you walk into a high stakes moment, whether that's a meeting or presentation, your body fires up its fight or flight system. So your heart rate climbs, adrenaline kicks in, and you get that tight, jittery feeling in your chest. Now, a little of that is actually really good. It makes you alert, but you go past a certain point of arousal and it's negative. It's not great. It's not what you want, because you start to tense up, your words tangle, and it gets generally harder to think straight and stay composed, which is the exact thing you walked in there to do, right? So the thing to do before this kind of thinking isn't to fire yourself up more, it's to take the edge off and bring that arousal back down into the zone where you're switched on, but calm. Some gentle movement really helps. So does breathing. So slow breath in and long exhale. Really, really good, and actually tips you toward the rest and digest side of your nervous system, and starts to settle your heart rate and let all that arousal start to come back down to a much more manageable kind of amount. So a bit of easy movement and some slow breathing before you go into that room, rather than kind of pacing up and down the corridor, winding yourself up tighter and tighter. This is probably the most surprising, I think, of the three, and there's real depth to it. So go and watch that video as well, which I'll link. So now, if you kind of stand back and just kind of think, what have I just been talking about? What have I just kind of handed to you, if you like? So we've got 3 days, 3 completely different demands on your brain, and a specific way to train for each. You're no longer kind of exercising and hoping the benefit lands somewhere useful. You're aiming it, and it's deliberate. And when you start doing that across a whole week, something clicks into place. You stop training around your work and you start training for your work. That's the actual method, and it's simpler than it sounds. So you look at your diary, look at your week ahead, and you see what each day is really asking of your brain, and you line your training up to serve it. So if you've got heavy thinking on the Tuesday, your presentation on the Thursday, creative session, you want to protect on the Friday, you train for each of those differently. So on purpose, deliberately targeted training. Your work diary and your training diary start pulling in the same direction instead of fighting over the same hour, And I promise you, once you've run a week or two like that, going back to training at random feels like You're leaving kind of money on the table. And it doesn't stop at your training. You know, the same thinking can be applied to how you eat and how you recover. So what you eat sets how steady your focus is through the entire day, you know, beating that afternoon slump. How you sleep decides how much of any of this you can actually even reach the next day. So movement, food and sleep, they're all just levers on the same kind of machine, and that machine is how well your brain performs. So training simply is where I start, because it's the strongest lever that you've got, the one I think people waste the most. So if you take one thing away from all of this, don't let it be one thing, you know, let it be the whole thing, a new way of seeing it. Stop asking, did I get my workout in today? And start asking, what is my brain doing today and what would set it up best? Now, that one question will do more for your performance than any single session ever could, because it turns your training from a thing that you do for, you know, general health into an edge that you carry into your work, your life, your ambitions. So here's the one thing that I would love for you to do, and I'm keeping it deliberately small. So look at tomorrow, find the one thing that counts most, the hard problem, the thing you're stuck on, the meeting you want to walk into sharp, and do just one small thing that primes your brain for it. You know, 10 minutes of easy movement before the deep work, a walk before you sit down to do your creative stuff, a few slow breaths before you go into a big meeting or something. Not the whole system, just one rep, because the first time you feel it, actually work, you never look at training the same way again. And you don't have to work it out from scratch, because I've done a bunch of videos and the deep dives are in there. There's a full episode on training for analytical focus, one on moving for a creative work, and one on staying sharp under pressure. Now, find the one that matches your week and start there. I'll link them all. And if you want to see where your own brain is being helped or held back right now by your own training, your sleep and the way you eat, I've built a free 3-minute assessment that shows you exactly that. And I'll put the link in the description below. And if you want to go deeper, the newsletter is where I break the science down properly every single week in a way that you can actually put it into work. So you can subscribe that in the link below. That's it for this one. Now go and train for the day that you're actually having and see what your brain does when you finally give it what it needs. Good luck. Have a good one.